Okay. Hi, everyone. Thank you all for joining the breakout session 3. So I'm Akshata. I work as a project manager in CGS Initiative on Digital Innovations. So I hope everyone is in the correct breakout session, right? This breakout session called Gender and Inclusion. So yeah, we're going to start. I will just set the context for this session. So we have like 4 presentation. So we have 15 minutes for the presenter to present their presentations. And then I think overall it is 15, like 12 minutes for the presentation and 3 minutes for the discussions. So we're going to take the Q&A from the room here and also from the chat and the online. So the first presenter is Minnie Wanjiku from Farmbetter. So yeah, floor is over to you, Minnie.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, online and physically. Thank you for joining me in this presentation. I'll take you through the journey of a project that Farmbetter is partnering with called AgriPath and the kinds of results we've gotten from gender inclusion. But I'll tell you a story. It's afternoon, I'm sure you're full. So stories are the best way to present this. So I'm presenting on advancing gender inclusive sustainable land management through localized digital innovations. My name is Minnie Wanjiku. I am the Director Program Management at Farmbetter. So I'll share stories of people we've actually gone the journey with in terms of gender inclusivity. So meet Annette. Annette is a farmer in Butaleja, which is in eastern Uganda. And common problems around where she is from include soil erosion and soil fertility problems. So based on the project, she's been able to learn using Farmbetter for Farmers app. It's a toolkit, it's a DAS toolkit that we're using. She's been able to learn practical and localized knowledge about mulching using dry grass, composting using manure, and crop rotation as an IPM measure. So what she's been able to do is turn whatever resources she has locally and then being able to increase soil fertility without causing harm to the environment, as well as seeing a lot of better input because she's practicing what she's learning from the WOCAT library. So WOCAT is a partner we have who have a library of a lot of knowledge that we've synthesized into bite sizes where the farmers can be able to actually access, read, and apply almost immediately. So this is a partnership between Kilimo Trust Uganda and Farmbetter. And with all the knowledge that she has, and I'd say even the income that she has, she's going to continuously learn because she can learn by herself without the help of an extension agent, because the app actually gives her, again, practical and local knowledge. And then she can also teach the farmers around her on how to apply the knowledge that she has. I'll move over to Rita. Rita is from India, from Mirzapur. Now, what she's learned, again, using the app, the tool that we're using is agricultural practices such as minimum tillage, IPM, and an expert training helpline run by the AgriPath project. So she has ideally been able to address issues like soil erosion, compaction, drought, and soil fertility. So she's been able to take the same learnings, again, localized to her language, which is Hindi, and in WOCAT still accesses the same. And then she's been able to apply that and even be able to learn practically from the AgriPath project. And she's also continuously learning. So what does her future look like? She's now a VBA, a village-based advisor. And so she's teaching people to do the same thing. She's also getting a lot of income from the same things that she's learned. She's selling organic manure and other things that she's doing in terms of organic inputs, as well as even what she gets from her farms. So she's also planning to, also through continuous learning, she's becoming a catalyst of change for both ladies and the gentlemen in the community that she lives in. And it's also going to help in terms of the input. We also have a lady called Lakshmi Dawadi from Nepal, and she's been working as a facilitator with IDE, our implementing partner, since 2017. And also she's received trainings both from the app and from the local implementer, where she's been able to also disseminate the same learnings she has, SLM practices, also through the app, and teach farmers. So what she's been able to learn is crop rotation, vermicomposting, IPM, and then livestock and integration. What are her future plans? Same thing as Rita and Anita. She has a business, so she's able to sell the seedlings, sell compost, and being able to actually also educate other farmers. She has a business model that she has where she's growing seasonal vegetables and selling, but she also wants to ideally continue influencing the community using what she's learning, integrating new technologies that she's learning, and empowering the women in her village through the same things that she's learning through the DAS and the project that is there. So literally, our farmers, what we've learned from the beginning of the project till now is that our farmers are literally practicing what they're learning. And you can see it cuts across problems in East Africa and problems in Asia as are very similar in terms of the farm. So there's nothing new. All we have to do is keep giving farmer information. So how they've been able to achieve this is through the AgriPath project. So the AgriPath project is teaching sustainable land agriculture at scale using sustainable toolkits. For example, Farmbetter, which is the organization I am from. So we are supporting smallholder farmers and agricultural extension officers the last mile. If you look at the ratio of extension agents, and primarily in Kenya, I think it's one extension agent to about 3,000 farmers. There's no person who can be able to do that physically. Even if you had a year, you wouldn't be able to do that. But using our toolkit, which is called Farmbetter, you can be able to advise farmers on WhatsApp or even on Facebook Messenger, and they're able to access the information. You can even be able to send videos and pictures, and they're able to get that. So the AgriPath project is looking to empower 150 agents, 50,000 male and female farmers to be able to access good agricultural practices and be able to actually adapt them and be able to practice them. And then that's part actually of what we follow up on, that we actually want to see the practical aspect of that. But we're not doing that alone. We are working with implementing partners in the locations that we are at, which are Burkina Faso, Uganda, Tanzania, Nepal, and India. We are working with ministries and other stakeholders to make sure that we are both contextual and also that we are also facing very little backlash from working alone. You can't be able to implement a project alone. So what AgriPath is trying to work on for the entire project is research on what barriers and enablers in terms of picking up of digital tools, the behaviors that we're actually picking on how females use apps, how males use apps, how they take the information, understand it, and are able to put it into work. That is also something that we're going to take away as a learning from this. Also in terms of scaling the results, so you've been able to teach the 50,000. How would it look like if we taught 100,000 millions, for example? So that's some learnings we're taking from now, and then we're going to proceed with them as a result of the project. Lastly, we're actually doing a dissemination of results. So how does it look like? So we've done six countries. Can the same be locally applied? Is it where we're going to use the same model again, or do we use a different technique because we're looking at different cultures and different neighbors as well? So this is how the AgriPath project looks like. You can see where Farmbetter comes to play, where we are actually using our app and WOCAT. WOCAT is a world overview of conservation approaches and technology. And this is pretty useful because we're getting a lot of peer-to-peer reviewed content from there. But the first work package is just us understanding the people we are helping. Again, focus on the problem, not on the solution. So we've done a lot of focus groups. We've done a lot of experiments, human-centered design experiments. That is why we were able to finally agree that the use of WhatsApp and the use of Facebook Messenger is the best way for us to disseminate information. Nepal, for example, WhatsApp is not as common as Facebook Messenger. So we had to change our tact there. Burkina Faso, they have smart dumb phones. It's a smartphone, but because of the operating system it's built on, it can't take other apps. So what do? We then look at the use of USSD and IVR to be able to apply the same kind of information, and also look at partners who we can be able to use as call centers to disseminate the same information. We are also with the ICTforAg and Grameen Foundation India. They're the ones that are doing the specific research in Uganda and India, as well as Tanzania, Burkina Faso, and Nepal. Finally, we have the last one, which is about disseminating and the scaling framework. So what happens then? The Grameen Foundation, what happens then after the project? Do we leave it as that? Do farmers continue benefiting from that, or exactly what that looks like? So this is how the future is. So we are at work package 2, and we are taking the learnings as we move forward. So what are the bottlenecks and solutions we've come up from this? I'm glad Rhoda, in the very first panel, she shared a lot of this, but I'll just beat the horse. It's already dead, so let me just do it, kill it. So one, there's limited access to technology. I mean, sometimes being in Kenya, you think the world looks like Kenya. Honestly, we are at a huge advantage. I've traveled for the project and I can tell you, it is not the same way. So some of those things that work so instantaneously in Kenya's mobile money don't work all over the world, even in countries that are more diverse than we are. So in terms of smartphones, computers, and the internet, there's a lot that we've been able to learn that is also restricting our ability, but we're not looking at it as a disadvantage, but more in terms of part of the finding is that the reason we can't be able to participate, we can't be able to make sure that the last mile of extensive services is done is because we have actually these limitations. But how are we looking to counter that? Look for partners, as Matthew said, with local ISPs. If they're able to zero rate the app, that ideally means that the app is usable by ideally everyone, because all you need is literally a charged phone. Also, the beauty about how it works is that the tools we've chosen to use, which is WhatsApp and Facebook Messenger, ideally are free of charge. Okay, in Kenya at least. The minute you buy a bundle, then WhatsApp comes as a ride along. So the bot that we're using on WhatsApp to be able to help farmers report the problems on their farms allows them to also be able to chat with the agent and get feedback from the agent on the same. In terms of literacy, we're also looking at partnering with organizations that are giving simplified content to the next generation of farmers. So you notice that digital literacy cuts across because of language, for example, the kind of language you're using, as well as the fact that phones are a new thing. And most of the people who own farms, especially in Africa, are the older generation. So trying to tell my grandma about learning about something new on the phone, she's like, pass. Let me just do business as usual. We've not died yet. There's no fire, so let's just keep at it. Cultural and social norms. Sometimes when you're partnering with local organizations, you find that you can't even use the words as empower the women to be free of, use that word and the men are like, my wife wants to leave me now because of you're teaching her to leave me. So we're using local partners to implement it. And then we actually ask them, what is the right language to address? What is the right way for me to dress while I'm addressing the women? What is the right language to use? The intonation, how do I answer questions? How do I greet people? That is something that we are learning from the project. And therefore we are implementing that even when we're doing focus groups and doing capacity training. Limited resources, this will not even go here. We already understand what that looks like. There are places the smartphone belongs to the man of the house. So the ladies have to wait till he's home for them to get the kind of information that we're doing. Again, partners like ISPs can be able to help us support such innovations, either by giving, but look at it in terms of Kenya, where you partner with Safaricom and then they give phones that you can pay slowly, or M-Kopa, same concept. If you get such partners and you're able to implement such things in this project. However, these are learnings that may not change anything now, but these are learnings that we're taking into the future for this project and other projects. Digital infrastructure, sometimes when you are in Nairobi, you think everything is okay till just a kilometer from Nairobi and the network is off. So what does that mean? Our toolkits that we're using right now allow the farmer to be able to download all the content, extension agents, to download all the content they need, and that content is available to them offline the whole entire time they're going to be using it. So whenever they can be able to access internet, then if they can be able to access internet and then just download the content and keep it on their phone. Representation and participation, again, this is the reason we're here. We're trying to understand how do we then include the women, because some women are either inheriting farms, they find themselves with a new farm and they have no idea on what to do because the information was held by a group of people, and now they have to now change their mindset and be able to understand how that looks like. So what does it look like? We are learning the behaviors on how they use the phone. How do women learn? They learn using video. When they learn, do they learn from a woman instructor or from a man instructor? They learn from a woman because maybe the man is seemingly a threat. Or in terms of religion, you're not allowed to learn from a man who's not your husband. So what does that look like? We need to look for women instructors and then be able to do that. So that's kind of what we're learning through human-centered design and behaviors around the app. We're trying to see who do we use to teach the right gender, the right way, such that the information doesn't look like it's more forced upon them, but more like a collaborative effort. Thank you so much for this. I'll take questions. Thank you. Wow, I was good. No questions. Thank you.
So is there any questions for Minnie? So the floor is open, so you can ask if there isn't any questions.
Yeah, please.
Yeah,
please.
please.
We need to hear. I can ask it.
No, there isn't.
Hi, my name is Washington. My question is, sorry, my name is Washington. My question is with regards to a lot of the platforms are very one way, where we tell the farmer things, we rarely hear from the farmer. So I don't know if you're looking into that and how you're trying to overcome that, because the work I do is supporting farmers, but it's so difficult to hear from them. You give them information, you're not sure if it's useful. Did it help them? Is it relevant? So how do we, or how are you dealing with that?
Okay. That's a very interesting question. So our platform usually uses WhatsApp as a chatbot, where the farmer and the extension agent can have a communication using pictures, videos, voice note, or text. Where if a farmer is experiencing a problem on the farm, they can take a video, sent to the extension agent. The extension agent can also take a video of the solution and send it to them. So it's a two-way communication in terms of the tools we're using. Over and above that, we also create communities for the farmers. So if we have farmers in Butaleja, for example, we create communities for the extension agents where we directly train the extension agents on sustainable land management practices, as well as also with the farmers. So what we do is, for the project is that the farmers are not in a group by themselves. They have the experts behind them. When they ask questions, someone is responding to the WhatsApp channel. WhatsApp right now, I believe, is probably the biggest tool of communication that is being used in the world. So our platform allows communication from the bot to the app, for the farmer to the extension agent, and the extension agent from the bot to the app, as well as WhatsApp to WhatsApp, or messenger to messenger for the farmers and extension agents. Yes, please.
So thank you, Winnie. Good presentation. I'm trying to understand the intersection between the app and the chatbot.
Yes. So
Is it an API?
yes, it is. It is an API where there's a connection between, for AgriPath, we're actually testing 3 models, how farmers learn by themselves. If you give farmers the tools they need to learn, would they learn and implement by themselves? Therefore, the RCTs, extension agents, again, the ratio of an extension agent in Kenya is probably 1 to 4,000. So if an extension agent had a tool that gave them information on a regular, like literally it's an encyclopedia of information, how easy is it for them to disseminate the information from the app to WhatsApp? And then we're also testing agents who are just studying and then going to train, as I am right now. You go find farmers, you have a sit down, and then you train them on the practices. So there's a connection between the app and the chatbot that allows for the hybrid model for the extension agent to literally have daily conversations with farmers on WhatsApp.
And do you have insights that are coming out of the 3 models yet, in terms of what's working best or better?
I could say we have insights, yes. Some farmers who are primarily DIY, and mostly the younger or more tech savvy ones, actually are practicing the content they're seeing. Like the ladies I shared, they're already practicing and even giving feedback to it. In terms of the extension agent only, you notice that farmers feel as if they're not enabled enough. So they have to, it's like a mother bird, birds are waiting to be fed. So that by itself is also teaching us to understand, if we allow that kind of model to work, does it mean that do they become overly reliant on the extension agent and therefore don't go out of their way to get information? Such that, and then the information that is being given by extension agent, do they test it, or do they wait for the extension agent to actually come and then show the process? Yeah, there are a lot of learnings coming out of that. You're welcome.
So Minnie, is this the login based, or it's an open that is available on the Play Store for the beneficiaries too?
It is available on the Play Store, and we don't limit it to just the project.
Okay.
if you know a farmer who needs information online, just tell them to go look for Farmbetter for farmers, and then they can be able to go to the good practices and start to learn by themselves. The good thing about the good practices is that WOCAT has reached out to all the, I'd say, agricultural techies, the ones that live and dream and thrive there. So they've been able to give us peer-to-peer reviewed content. Then we've simplified it into the kind of information you need. So if it's about composting, it was said in the morning, there's a whole paper. Who reads that? As a farmer, I just need to know what, how, and then how again. So if you tell me a manure, urine, and chilies, what are the ratios I mix them at, how I apply it to my plants, how often, what to expect. So that's exactly what we've done. We've given that. So for extension agents, we've also given them the same tool where they actually are able to access all the content from WOCAT, be able to see what we've been able to simplify. And if you look at composting, we give you composting content from like 10 countries, such that you can be able to actually connect with, oh, so this is a similar problem in Nepal, in Uganda, in Kenya. Then you're able to learn from different regions so that your scope of learning is not narrowed to just where you are, probably in the district of the country.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any other questions? Yeah, if no, let's wind it off. Thank you, Minnie. Thank you very much for the beautiful presentation. And it's a very productive, I feel.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting me.
Yeah. Now we have the second presenter. It is Vishal Ajmera from Zion. Is that correct? Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, please, over to you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Been some fascinating sessions this morning, and happy to be here. My name is Vishal Ajmera. I'm from Accion. We're a global nonprofit, and we have 3 verticals, but I'm a part of the advisory team, essentially doing a lot of technical assistance work. Now, the topic today, of course, financing a greener and a more equitable future for women farmers in itself could be a conference. I have 15 minutes. So the things that I'm not going to touch upfront is, of course, there are some needle moving aspects to this: political will, efficient use of subsidies, how the capital markets can function better. I'm not going to be able to cover that. What I'm going to do is to talk to you from a lens of a project that we've implemented, which was funded by the Gates Foundation, some of the learnings from it. And maybe the idea is some of the aspects would resonate with the team of folks in the room, and may invite some conversation. And always happy to, take this offline if of interest. So thankfully this morning, a lot of speakers helped me sort of frame the problem, so don't need to go into it a lot. But as we can just from all the conversation understand that the gap in agricultural financing is huge. And if you sort of narrow that down to women, it's probably a rounding error of what comes down to women agri entrepreneurs and farmers themselves. But I want to take this opportunity to underscore two aspects. Why women, first and foremost? I mean, apart from a whole host of other reasons, but the fact that climate migration means we're driving youth and men out of small holding farmers, farmland, and that means we're leaving a lot of activities to women themselves. So they are actually at the forefront of battling on both climate and driving productivity as well. And why green? Just recently, there was a paper published by the World Bank, a recipe for a livable planet. And they talked that there's a sort of an ROI of 16 to 1 when you're considering climate aspects in your investments because of the other benefits around health, economic, and environmental benefits that come out of it. So it's really important to look at those elements as well. So moving on, what I'm going to do is just not spend a lot of time here, but give a quick sense of what we attempted to do. So through the funding we received, essentially what we tried to do is leverage that funding to the philanthropic capital to identify what levers can we use to unlock financing from the ecosystem, right? So we're not reinventing the wheel, but we identified the various ecosystem players and stitched them up together to experiment at different models. Now, a couple of points that I want to sort of highlight over here. One is that we narrowed down on one value chain because I think it's even one value chain in a different context may look different, in different market conditions. So we looked at smallholder dairy farmers in India and Kenya, but also with a focus on women, dairy farmers particularly. And given that this was a project that was aimed at more of a learning agenda and setting up a demonstration model, we decided to look at what we call complex assets. So in this case, we use a biodigester because the decision-making around a biodigester has multiple aspects to it. It's not as straightforward as a foundational asset as we may think about something like a water tank or a chef cutter or irrigation equipment that farmers already understand the benefit. It's a matter of giving them more affordable financing mechanism to acquire the asset. So we looked at more of a complex asset class. And then the idea was to explore what are those pathways to scale and what market conditions sort of would help them work. Now, definitely very strong elements of capacity building and product development over here. So again, this slide over here is just to give you a sense of that this project actually had three main components. It was around product, partnerships, and gender, right? Now, we explored a bunch of different partnerships. Now, we engaged a lot, but we actually onboarded 9. Obviously, the timelines, it takes a long time from MOU to actually execution without other levels that you could bring on the table, including whether it is some type of a credit guarantee fund or so. So while I'm not going to go into depth of each of these models, but again, more than happy to share this offline. But the idea was, can we set up different financing models to see what is working? So, for example, the very first one with Systema and Stellups was there was no intermediation by an FSP. It's directly going to the offtake market, designing a payment plan so that the farmers can acquire an asset. So taking out the FIs in this case. The intent was to see that would that offtake sort of arrangement work and scale, right? And some interesting things around it. And on the other side, in Kenya, we explored the model, a typical asset financing model, and certain challenges there when you're directly in competition with the SACCOs, that makes it very difficult to compete with. And also sad to see what's happened to Copia recently, but it would have been an interesting model nonetheless. So what I want to do is sort of highlight some of the challenges that we saw from our aspect. And again, this is purely from an adoption perspective. There are 8 of them. I'm just going to bring them up on the screen and touch upon some of them. Now, one of the aspects we saw that when we were looking to bring something like a biodigester, which is complex, we had to fight through customer perception. Even though there was a new technology, for the first time when you're talking to a farmer, they're still thinking of a biodigester as that brick and a dome structure. So we needed them to unlearn and relearn what we are trying to talk about. So it's important to localize that aspect of it when you're trying to take a more complex asset. The gender intentionality piece, again, we talk about it in very broad terms, but very specifically, what we did over here was when we're selling the biodigester, we realized when we're speaking to the women in the household, it was important to tell them how much time is going to save them if they're collecting brown fuel like firewood, or how many LPG canisters it would save them per month. For the men, we had to tell them what is a cost saving, right? So bringing those finer elements in terms of your communication strategies was important. Obviously, empowering through successful stories that resonates a lot when you go to a lead farmer who's speaking about it. It's definitely more powerful. So what we did there with as a part of the funding we had, we catalyzed farmers and hired a bunch of buses to carry them to a lead farmer location to see it for themselves. The other aspect, again, that was spoken about Ian this morning around just the capacity building, but we feel like the readiness of the field staff, right? One part is getting management to agree with it, but do your incentives actually align for the field staff to cross-sell as well, right? In some cases, they're so busy managing their loan portfolios, whereas this could be a side activity. You break down field staff's activities across a month. First week of the month, they're selling. Last week, they're collecting. You literally have 2 weeks for anything new. And even in that, making sure if they have a whole bouquet of products, how do they prioritize one, and how does it impact the community as well, right? And helping them on those mechanisms. Again, I think there was a question just asked in the last session in terms of a continuous feedback gathering mechanisms. And over here, again, there's no straightforward answer to this, but as a part of the project, we made sure that anytime something was launched, the team went out and saw how it was working, spoke to the farmers to see what can be tweaked. And that is where things like the gender intentionality pieces came out, right? When we ask a farmer, like, how does the cost saving actually resonate with you when we are speaking to you about it, right? Like, what are the information you would like? Those are the sort of things that make it to the collateral, and we take it forward. One thing we also realized when going to more women farmers is introducing a new product in a group setting was more comfortable. So you always had one woman that was more outspoken and would be sort of the front and asking the question on behalf of the group, which sort of helped others also clarify any doubts that came out of it. I mean, the man's gatekeeping of the women's finances is a huge issue. And again, this often came about a lot. Now, this is something where I think there are certain policy aspects we could look at, regulatory aspects we could look at, but at least from a partnership perspective, can we come out with more products that are pro women in terms of whether it is longer tenures, slightly an advantage on the interest rate, right? Or longer technical servicing on the field. What are those other levels that we can look at where women feel more empowered that, no, if I am taking partake in this, I want to own this end to end, and because there is also benefits around it. And also on the grievance redressal bit, it's important that the women smallholder farmers understand that they do have a channel. Like, it doesn't have to be driven by the male loan officer, but maybe there's a dedicated channel who they can reach out to, and there are women on the other end. They may feel more comfortable in terms of speaking to any concerns, right? Now, this slide over here, the idea is just we consolidated a bunch of case studies, and while I'm not going to read through all of them, but there's certain aspects that are sort of unintended or unintentional that come out of it, right? While we think about taking assets, we're thinking productivity, we're thinking in terms of livelihood, but there are certain aspirational elements that can come out of it. Something as simple as women being happy, they don't have to use firewood, so the soot from the firewood doesn't stay in the kitchen. You know, something as small as that made them, happy and felt like it was adding to their day to day. But this, the visual over here you see is this is a woman called Kailashben in Gujarat in India. She's the one who was collecting firewood. She was chopping it, and to a point that she has no fingerprint. So she had issues around identity. You know, when you look at the Aadhaar card, because it's biometric, right? So, and while that's the husband's hand, right? So, and also we've spoken a lot about, and there are lots of studies where while women do most of the work, they have the least access to the revenues that come out of farming activities. So there's some very empowering stories that come out of this when we get on the ground and understand it. Beyond all of this, just the reduction of drudgery, right? And them being able to reapply that, give more time to their children, maybe towards another business or so. So I know I'm out of time, but just a few things. Now, when we think of capacity building, we think of it in two very distinct aspects: institutional capacity building and customer capacity building, right? While the customer capacity building, we've seen a lot of innovation around it in terms of digital channels, taking it to their channel of comfort, right? What they're comfortable using and how you go around it. But at an institutional level, something as simple as there's a convenience where he's gender biased. So if there's a male loan officer going out, he's completely going to bypass the woman, because if he wants a wet signature, he'll just go to the men of the household, right? So how do you actually educate them, right? And all of this, again, and it was spoken earlier this morning, we have to stay with the problem, right? There's no straightforward answer, but these are just some of the reflections that came out of it, right? How are we more of a gender sensitization workshops at an institutional level, so that everyone understands the key aspects and why they're doing it. The why is very important. A lot of time we boil it down to the numbers and the business case. Maybe the buy-in at a why level is very important as well, right? And of course, some of this I already covered, so I'm not going to touch upon that, but there's a strong aspect around incentives as well. Like, what incentive do they have to actually reach out to the women? Also discomfort dealing with female customers. Again, that is something in terms of, can you hire more women as a part of your field staff, so on and so forth. And the very last slide, again, and I'm just going to touch upon this one last one, and then I'll end it here. In terms of the men's gatekeeping of the women's financing, I mean, over there, really looking at more intentional product design in terms of reaching out to the women. And there's certain challenges around there. Like when we work from the offtake side, the easier solution was whoever was whatever the owner of the account was, whatever gender pouring milk with the off-taker, is the one who'd acquired the asset. So what we went in and did is, can we actually still have the woman as the co-owner of the asset, irrespective of who the whatever gender is actually pouring milk over there. Also, the other aspect is like, can we get more facilities around saying, like, so woman borrower, we're going to extend the tenure, because they may, and we know from research that when women actually take control of the finances, they invest more in the business, family, health, education. So how can you make sure that the ownership is coming down at that level as well? So that also requires, from the private sector perspective, from the offtake side, to encourage more of that sort of ownership as well. And yeah, that's it. Thank you, and happy to take any questions. Yeah.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I know, okay, especially in Africa, taking into consideration my village, going to fetch firewood is actually a social thing.
Yeah.
Where you get time away from your husband and your kids, and
Yeah.
you know, like
Yes.
who gossip time. So do you put this into consideration when you're introducing a new innovation? Because as much as it's taken away it's given me back my fingerprints, it's taken away girl time. And in the village, you don't have time to tell your husband, oh, it's girls' night. It's girls walking to firewood, and gossiping, girls coming back with gossiping, and we hate our children. So how do you, how would you solve that problem in the sense that you're not taking away their social time away, but they're still able to benefit from the innovations?
So I mean, maybe answering this from this angle, that in India, what we've seen is that on a similar aspect, that women do gather, it's more of a social thing to go out. And also there's a cultural norm that maybe the rotis or the chapatis they cook has to be from the firewood, right? So the idea there was in conversation is like to say, like, you don't have to forego that. But maybe when you're heating water or cooking your proteins, you're moving to a more sustainable source. So it may be doing a little bit less of this, not taking away from what it actually gives you, but also educating you on the benefits of adopting a more sustainable source. So the other aspect that we've seen is, like, in Kenya, the arrangement is like, you have this tin shed where the cooking happens away from everything else. So the women are more prone to respiratory diseases because of that. The woman of the household and the girls as well. So there's an education element there, that how it impacts your health. Maybe you're still doing the firewood for whatever the basic needs are, but is there a way you can shift it, and again, it's also like a broader debate around the whole, when we talk about sustainable energy and fossil fuels, the idea is like, asking people to move away from the entire infrastructure that's built on fossil fuel today is impossible. You have to transition out of it. So it requires that localized understanding, those nuances. And again, for Kenya, I don't have an example, but in India, this is what happened.
Mine is on the financing piece. Because traditionally financial institutions have looked at smallholder farmers and particularly women as being very high risk. So I'm just curious to understand the approach that you're taking to sort of shift that conversation or to demonstrate value to actually get the financial institutions interested in the financing piece.
Yeah, no, sure. And actually, like I said, this the three key aspects of this project was the product, and there is the financing product, partnerships, and gender. I only cover gender here. So on the financing bit, there are a couple of thoughts on this. First and foremost is that we're very eager when we think of creating a new product to push the financial institutions to start dispersing it right away. But there's an element of trust building with FIs and taking them to a place of their comfort. So maybe first season, they'll be comfortable lending towards this new asset class, but to a customer segment that they're comfortable with. And you need to give them that time, right? Maybe it's more men, maybe it's customers with a higher vintage. And then you slowly transition them to more of the new to credit or more women farmers as well. Now, also on that front, there's no guarantee it will happen that way. But one aspect is also there is that when you look at your traditional asset financing products out there, they're all geared towards foundational assets that the banks understand. Now, as a role of a catalyst of what we did in this place, can we take a business case to them and say, like, look, by doing this, not only you're benefiting the farmer, but you're de-risking your portfolio, right? Now, one example there is like when we took the biodigester to Pehel, who was a FSP partner in India, the idea there was to tell, and again, this is still in conversation, is that, are you willing to consider the 1,000 rupee cost savings as a part of your P&L when you look at your customer and take it into your appraisal mechanism? And they were okay with it, but they wanted to see enough of traction before they take it. Now, this is where it requires staying with the problem, right? You can't expect first season for them to go there right away. And also, this is also where more efficient use of subsidies from the government may come into play. If you're saying that we want to take it towards the women farmers, can you make it more specific towards that where it can go into some type of de-risking mechanism as well? And also when we look at blended finance solution around risk guarantees as well, can be more focused around there. So I think as a development space as a whole, there is an opportunity to be more focused to drive that ownership on that front. And I know I'm way over time.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Vishal. Thank you very much for the presentation. I know many people are very interested to know about the financial aspect of the gender. So I think maybe you keep your points. We'll start next presentation. At the end, we'll take those questions if we have time left. So now we call upon Renee, and she'll be talking on inclusive ICT solutions, right? Yeah. Over to you, Renee.
Kind of good, it wasn't even on.
That'll make it
Wonderful.
There you go.
All right. Well, thank you. And that was a technical glitch, and we'll just have to work through this. Good afternoon. My name is Renee Bullock. I'm a senior scientist here at ILRI working on issues of gender inclusion, gender and social inclusion. And I'm going to be presenting some stories and some work from a World Bank funded project that we have been implementing in drylands, Kenya, for the most part. So ICRA, Sophia Heyer may be online. She's an ICRA gender coordinator who's also contributed to the presentation. Now I have to go to the next one. So how shall I do this? Just manual clicking.
Yeah.
As has already been highlighted, I think around the world, there are some digital gaps that we're familiar with, uneven access and ownership of various digital technologies and some of the gender inequality outcomes that results in. So there are some issues in rural areas. There's also some differences between women and men's access. There are some substantial barriers that women in particular may face, affordability. We've talked a little bit about women's control of income. So that has been raised as some of the issues that can prevent women from gaining access to information. And in Kenya, women are 27% less likely than men to own mobile phones. So while Kenya certainly is advancing, there are still some significant gaps in other areas. In talking about social inclusion, I think we do talk about gender quite a bit, but it's important to ask ourselves, what do we mean by inclusion and why does it matter? There are a lot of intersecting types of factors. It might be geography, it might be poverty, network access. There are a lot of different issues beyond the binary understanding of women and men. So diverse users often rely on very different sources of information. I think while this is an ICT-centered approach, I kept thinking of people. Where are the people in the ICT solutions? Dissemination channels are different for everybody. What works where and for whom is something that is often very localized. In our work, SMS, we've done a lot of SMS pushes. Radio is key. I'll share a little bit about some of the radio work we did. Barazas are these community level meetings that are really very, very important information channels. And I say collectives here, but what I'm really thinking about is in Baringo, there's this, they told us we don't use radios. We have a man who sits under a tree and he broadcasts the information about the weather. So there are many different diverse ways in which information is shared, and people at the heart of it is, I think, something that is important to evaluate or understand better when we think of the various solutions. The content, what do different groups want? I think relevance was something in a previous slide that not everybody thinks the information when we're looking at weather or agro advisories, maybe not everybody thinks it's relevant. People want different types of information. What kinds of information do they want is, I think, one of the questions. So just will share a little bit about some radio work. So I am a researcher. I think ICRA has been great in that it's given me an opportunity to gather evidence and then work into implementing based on some of our findings. So I think prior to this research, we had a very strong emphasis on SMS, but radios in the lower eastern counties in Kitui in particular was one of the most accessed, easiest to access and considered the most reliable. However, when we look at climate information services, the forecasts, the early warnings, there's generally low trust of the information. There's also a lot of information coming through SMSs when people do receive information. And actually, everybody said we wanted more collaboration and interactions between climate service providers. Kenya Met Department is key. There's also local institutions, Indigenous knowledge keepers or Indigenous knowledge institutions that I'll talk about in just a couple of minutes. So we did some radio pilots. We did a live talk show where we had a county KMD director who provided information through a 1-hour segment with opportunities for call-in. I think it's because when we talk about weather and when we look at the seasonal forecasts and all of the variability within a county, people want to hear from the person who knows it because it's very technical. And it's often not in the local language. So there are some issues with understanding even what are the forecasts. We also did a drama where we highlighted not only the forecast for, this was March, April, May last year, but we also had a kind of enactment of a family setting in which they hear the forecast and then they plan, because I think that's another impact area that we're all interested in getting to not just reach, but also impacting decisions, which is very much norm-based. So we did this this was conducted in a local language with the call-ins. And then we had feedback sessions around those to try to understand what works and what doesn't work. I think they talked about the timing, and there was also some content men weren't so interested when they heard more women speaking in the drama. So they said, give the men more space to speak so that we can hear them. I think there's this kind of not well or not much talked about or well understood role of climate observers. So in Kenya Met Department, who's the official collector of the data, the rainfall data, there are climate observers who are volunteers, some like this woman at the top for up as many as 15 years, who collects the rainfall data manually and submit and send this to the county directors, who then incorporate it into their forecasting, their understanding of what is the rainfall data, longitudinal trends. And I think increased linkages with these volunteer networks and with the, I think more vertical linkages with the county level officers is something that needs to be fostered because of the services that they provide and also because it's information that's used to generate agro advisories. And those agro advisories go out to people and it's intended to inform their decision making. So the data should be accurate. It should be clear, consistent. Within ICRA, RAM developed a mobile application to try to improve the accuracy of that. However, the issue is smartphones are not owned by many of the observers, and there needs to be more capacity development activities surrounding, and I think even capacitating many of the observers themselves. So something else is to take advantage of the various stakeholder platforms and trying to amplify impacts. So participatory scenario planning it's written into the Constitution. It's an effort to downscale information to users in a way that is locally relevant. So getting the information at county level is too broad. So bringing it down to wards or agroecological zones. And as I'd mentioned earlier, there was more demand for Indigenous knowledge, these forecasters within Indigenous communities. So there was a PSP in Baringo where there are many agro-pastoralists and especially pastoralists who really rely upon these Indigenous forecasters. They are valued, trusted, and really seen as being important in helping people understand what's going to happen and to plan. So at this particular PSP, there was the 3 Indigenous knowledge forecasters were invited. We also invited development partners because they're active in the area. They know about some of the solutions, especially water is a key one, pan dams, and they're implementing. So I think there's a lot more room for taking advantage of the stakeholder platforms to try to amplify up and out. And you can do that by inviting some of those key people to these various planning meetings and also cultivating and maintaining connections. So WhatsApp was mentioned. We generated a WhatsApp group from this that is really active and lively. I'm not sure how many participants, but KMD is putting the forecasts there. People were sharing with us, this is a picture of a baraza, how they're getting the information that they learned in the PSP out to their communities. It is very active. I think WhatsApp is a key, really important channel that we can use in ways to get information out. For those generally with smartphones, but knowing who the information sharers are can help amplify some of the more technical or technological sources of information. So some of the kind of recommendations or learnings is that I think conveying the significance of information, climate information services in particular to users is important. But I think there's also a lot to be learned from the local context. What are people doing? What are they using? What are their sources of information? Who's gaining access? Is it the young people who are traveling to the nearest town, getting all the information and coming back? Looking at who are the kind of harbors of information and who are the people that are really sharing the information. I think collaboration is key, developing these advisories. The PSP is already collaborative in nature by having a lot of participants, ward representatives, but I think there's more that can be done. Gender responsive training could also really help, I think, within the extension services, because there are quite a few men. There's some issues surrounding, I think we've heard a little bit about it, men approaching women feeling comfortable with men. So some more gender responsive training could support some of the collaboration between county level and community level members. And also finding out what is the most convenient interface to share information and getting the feedback. Getting the feedback is very important to shaping and customizing some of these various information sources or packages of information. The consultation and co-development with farmers, it's something we plan to do for the radio programs, is to have more co-development opportunities where they develop, or considering drama, so that people are the creators of the content. And mainstreaming social inclusion into ICT development. I think we've heard a little bit about gendered content. So in the case of crops and livestock activities, maybe women's and men's activities and interests differ. And trying to cater to those needs is something that will make it more relevant and possibly therefore more impactful. And that concludes the presentation. Thank you for your attention. And please contact me if you have any more questions.
Are there any questions for Renee? So we have like 3 or 4 minutes. So let's finish it off.
Thank you so much for your presentation, Renee. Quick question. You've mentioned the role of what's the right word? The people who have indigenous information about whether that is possibly not part of what KMD is sharing. Is there a role for such people moving on for even AgTech, for example, or more projects that you're working on? And how do we then take the information? Because it's not scientific per se, but it's still very valuable information. So how do we put that into digital spaces, and how do we partner with such people?
Maybe it depends on the values of the person. I think for this, the coordination of the Baringo PSP, that person said we need an integrated blended approach, because otherwise we'll go there and people are not going to listen to our scientific models. So I think, I mean, something we're trying to do is coordinate more that PSPs do build on and integrate more of the kind of even local observations, such as trees, flowering, winds. That particular one was the slaughtering of a goat and a reading of the intestines. People were so intrigued by this. Everybody, whether a scientist or a farmer, everybody was like, what does it? And then the 3 men just peering in and looking. And interestingly, they forecasted quite closely to what KMD had. They had it to a date. So I think sometimes there's there's skepticism around what comes in on the SMS, because it's like, who made that? Who did that? And I remember the qualitative, I do a lot of qualitative data collection. People were like, only God knows. So this information is like they don't, it's like demystifying the processes, and maybe even the KMD needs to also demystify and better understand what happens with the local kind of forecasting rather than dismissing it. So incorporating it maybe into videos or maybe different kinds of platforms. This one will be published as a blog. Kristen was covering us. She's written this up, and I think it's at least one example that will get out there, but access and trying to really champion integrated approaches, I think helps people feel like, okay, you've recognized and valued our traditions. And that's a way to help build trust. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, please.
Okay. Mine goes to you, but also to the other panelists. Just trying to understand gender better, the gender dynamics around the issues of development and empowerment. Do women always respond better to women agents or to female agents always? Is there a difference? Because it has come up. And then the question of the Vishal finance. The issue of ownership. Why is it important? I know this is women empowerment, but I'm trying to understand, why is it important that the woman owns the biodigester And does that end up creating more conflict in the family? Because I know like in the African setting, there's no way the man is gonna let the woman own the asset. It's complicated. And if it happened, would it end up creating more problems than solutions? So the question around women empowerment and the family dynamic, and how do we handle it?
Maybe to your first question, I don't think not always is it always like same gender. One of the cases I'm just remembering is that the men it was something like the men said that men agents gave women incorrect information, specifically women's information. So there's a lot of they think that maybe the women get special different information from anybody, whether a woman or a man, that there's a tailoring, like specific women information is different from men's. I think it's not always, but I think men who might be trained, there are men champions for women, recognizing that even approaching women in households helps them. It shows that they are valued as a voice and a decision maker within the household. A lot of things are embedded in some of these contexts where I've been working. Those kinds of gendered engagements have to be so careful because of the potential for gender-based violence and dismissing even violence as something that is cultural and therefore just okay. It's a process of engagement that I think is really sensitive. So finding out what works, there is no kind of one size fits all, and there is no one approach for all always works. It usually is so contextual. Over.